Absurd censorship this week. The publishers of the Roald Dahl's famous children's books announced a woke rewrite of the beloved author's novels. We're now going to have sensitivity readers that go through, and any content that is they consider offensive will be deleted. Words like fat and ugly, which obviously makes the book's fun to read. Now, the publishers have done a U-turn, which does happen if enough people speak up against wokeness. They've done a U-turn and said, oh, we'll publish both and then people can decide. Terrific. Joining us now is the editor of Spiked Online in the UK there, Tom Slater. Tom, great to see you as always. I hope you've been reading the latest Roald Dahl without any of the funny bits. I bet it makes for pretty grim reading if you take out all the gags.
Well, that seemed to be the substance of this rewrite. How do we take a Roald Dahl book, which are known for having a little bit of a dark edge to them, known for being a little bit spiky, a little bit rude in places, and how do we strip it of all of those things? Yes. Taking out the word fat from all of the books, so that the fat characters can't be fat shamed, presumably. The Oompa Loompas became gender neutral. It was really kind of almost comedically woke and ridiculous. It was interesting to see them backtrack and U-turn and issue these other responses. It does show you that actually standing up and making noise about these things can create a response. The problem is that so much of this is coming from within the publishing industry itself. No one signed a petition saying that they wanted Roald Dahl's books to be given this kind of woke acid wash. It was the Roald Dahl Story Company themselves who actually commissioned this particular round of sensitivity reading. So in a way, this is a good story for kind of people power, if you like, but it does show you that when it comes to this kind of woke cultural vandalism, the barbarians are very much inside the gates at this point.
James.
Well, Tom, I mean, it's one thing to save the oeuvre of Roald Dahl, but this reminds me so much of that scene in 1984 where they're basically destroying words literally so that nobody can ever have an unpleasant or seditious thought. That's what this seems to me. And when you've got this trend of sensitivity readers, doesn't this mean now that everything that's getting produced now, forget about the old canon, but everything is now being churned out, everything, from little kids to all other books, is now just being put through this woke wash, I guess you would call it. And so we wind up with no literature that doesn't fit within a certain prescribed narrative about who's good, who's bad, who's got the intersectional points, who's the victim, who's, this and who's that.
No, I completely agree. And sensitivity readers have been around for quite a few years now. This is a phenomenon that we've seen boil up. And what's interesting is exactly as you suggest, they tend to be set upon a work of literature before it even reaches print. And that is really sinister. I mean, it's essentially suggesting if something, with 1984 in mind, if it doesn't meet the party line on intersectionality, on all the things we're supposed to be sensitive about today, then it might never actually be published. And there's been cases of books certainly being unpublished. There was a case with an author, Kate Clanchy, in recent years in the UK, where because there was some outrage over a book that she'd published a couple of years ago, very trumped up, people dredging up quotes and taking them out of context. Again, sensitivity readers were given her book, and then as a consequence of this, it just ended up not being republished at all. So this is something which has already been going on in the publishing industry. It's not just children's books, it's throughout the whole piece as well. And so this is why it took the Roald Dahl case, because he's so beloved, to bring it up to the surface, but it's very entrenched at this point, definitely.
Rita.
Now, Tom, to change tact, what is this I'm hearing about fruit and vegetable being rationed? Is this the anti-Brexit forces being right? Have to now eat canned foods because you're no longer part of the EU? What's happening?
Well, if the Remainer Twitter is to be believed, then this is the Mad Max dystopia finally coming through. So essentially, yes, there's been a number of big supermarkets who are rationing the amount of salad bags you could buy, tomatoes, etc., because there has been bit of a delivery problem. This is primarily down to the fact that there's been a spot of bad weather in Spain and Morocco, which is where we get most of our tomatoes
Brexit made it from. Brexit did it. Brexit.
Exactly. I mean, Brexit's been blamed for a lot in recent years. I haven't yet heard it been blamed for the weather, but we've got there as well, which is good. I mean, it is so ridiculous, this story. I mean, you'll also notice that Ireland are having very similar problems, who are also in the European Union, we should remember. But, the people who've never really made their peace with the fact that the majority of people in this country vote to leave the European Union, they will jump on literally everything, even a bad spell of weather, to try and, again, reopen that whole score.
So,
for
Tom, you mentioned, the Irish question coming up again. We've got news today that Rishi Sunak's trying to do a deal with the Irish backstop and so on. This is all the ongoing shenanigans of Brexit because it wasn't done properly. You've got King Charles being dragged into it. Tell us what's the latest and what's happening there.
Yes, so Rishi Sunak essentially enlisted Charles to potentially meet with Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission. It's all part of this, what seems like the kind of final push to get his renegotiation on the Northern Ireland Protocol over the line. We haven't seen the detail of it yet. So it was supposed to be presented to Cabinet and to Parliament last week, but that didn't happen. So we still wait for the kind of white smoke to arrive at the negotiating table. But even from what we've been briefed and what we've been told about it, it doesn't look great, at least from a kind of Brexiteer and sovereignty perspective. A lot of these changes seem to be cosmetic, and none of it seems to address the fundamental problem, which is that the Brexit deal that Boris Johnson signed off on, which this Northern Ireland Protocol was part of, left part of the United Kingdom, Northern Ireland, in the single market for goods, subject to EU laws that people in Northern Ireland have no control over, and ultimately cases having to be adjudicated by a foreign court, the European Court of Justice. Everything we've heard so far sounds welcome, but it doesn't seem to grasp the nettle of the protocol, if you like. But, who knows? We wait to see what happens.